That's you. Alright, we're live. Some water. We're live. All praises and glories. Make sure we're coming through okay before we start up here. Already right. Ambulance. Shalom. GMS Tazadak Ban Yahawada. Shalom to you, my brother. Just checking that we're coming through live. Yeah, coming through okay. Praises and glory. Alright. So what's today's date? Today is the 11th. Damn, time is moving fast. Time is moving fast, as always. Make sure I'm on this camera okay. See the sign. Scriptures. As always, first I want to give all the praises and the glory to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, and to His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and to the elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to you, our elders. Shalom to the hopeful elect brothers and sisters of the house of Israel, the elect of the nation of Israel. The Bible speaks about the first fruits, 144,000, plus the 1/3, the mixed multitude, that are going to be scattered to the four corners of the world. Okay? Because remember, the Israelites are going to be scattered to the four corners of the world, mixed amongst all of the nations. Yeah, but the main place of deliverance is where? Babylon the Great, the United States of America. That's the main place of deliverance, family. So, I figured the brother Ricard is not here today. He's got man flu. He got man flu, apparently. He's got man flu, so he says he's not well, so he's not coming to camp today. So, you know, the show must go on, as always, and that, you know, whether a brother turns up or not, the show must go on, right? Because we're here to preach to the elect, to do the work. As the scripture says, we're laying up our treasures up in heaven, yeah? Not down here on earth. So, the spirit kind of jumped to me because I came here, I wasn't deciding what lesson I was going to do today, but a lot of the times I'll come to camp and I just open up the Bible, and wherever it opens up, I'm going to work from there. So I opened up the scriptures and it opened up at Daniel chapter 8. So I figured I haven't gone into Daniel chapter 8 for a little while. So I figured let's do it today while we're at camp today, basically, as such. And let's feed the flock because, as we always tell you, Daniel chapter 8 has already happened. It was a prophecy that came to the prophet Daniel while he was in captivity under the Babylonians. But what's taken place in Daniel chapter 8 has already happened, just like Daniel chapter 9 has already taken place. Daniel chapter 11 has already taken place. And then you would say some parts of Daniel chapter 1 has taken place, but Daniel 1 taking place, Daniel 2, some parts of 3, some parts of 2, some parts of 3. Daniel chapter 5 has taken place, basically in that, some parts of Daniel chapter 4 as such. But Daniel chapter 8, which we're going to focus on today, the vision of the ram and the goat has already taken place. So this is a prophecy that the prophet Daniel received while he was in captivity under the Babylonians, yeah, as such. So without further ado, let's hit the play. So this is the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 1. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, right? After that which appeared unto me at the first, because Daniel had several visions when he was in captivity under the Babylonians, yeah? But remember, Daniel also had a high position within the Babylonian empire as well, basically, as such, yeah? Along with, I always forget their names, Meshach, Abednego, Abednego, and Nehemiah. It's Nehemiah? Hananiah. So that, yeah, Hananiah, Shadrach, yeah. Yeah, because Daniel was given the name of Belshazzar, and Hananiah of Shadrach was given Shadrach. Hananiah was Shadrach, basically. And Mishael, or Michael, was given Meshach. And Azariah was given Abednego. So I was giving you their Babylonian names, Abednego, Meshach, and Shadrach. Those were their Babylonian names that they was given to them. But their Hebrew names that they had when they came into the kingdom, you know, was Daniel basically, Hananiah, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, basically. So these were the Israelites that were, when they were taken into captivity under the Babylonians, these were the men that refused to eat the food that the Babylonians were giving them, basically. So they asked to be fed, I believe it was the pulse from certain foods. Let's see if I can quickly find it. Daniel chapter 1. And they spoke about that. Yeah. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. It says, but Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not defile himself, right, with the portion of the king's meat, with the food that the Babylonians were giving them, basically, right? Nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore, he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. He didn't want to eat that defiled food that they were being given by the Babylonians. He wanted to eat something different, yeah? But the Babylonians knew, Nebuchadnezzar knew that Daniel and those certain men were highly respected, highly regarded men within the Judean kingdom, the southern kingdom, even before they came into captivity. So this is verse 9. This is Daniel chapter 1, verse 9. It says, now the Most High had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord, the king, who has appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then you shall make me endanger my head to the king. So he didn't want to present Daniel, the eunuchs, the head of the eunuchs, didn't want to present Daniel and Hananiah and Misha and Azariah. He didn't want to present them to Nebuchadnezzar looking drawn, face drawn in, as if they hadn't been fed, not being looked after. So he wanted them to eat the king's meat. But Daniel says here, verse 11, then said Daniel to Belshazzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our continence be looked upon before thee, and the continence of the children that eat the portion of the king's meat, as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So Belshazzar, he consented to that. He said, okay, we're going to give you pulse to eat, which would be mainly fruits. I believe if we look at what the pulse is, it would be fruits to eat instead of the king's meat. So Daniel basically was proposing to the prince of the eunuchs, Belshazzar, say, look, in 10 days' time, you're going to see that when you look at us, our face is going to look more ruddy, more healthy, because that's what really the word ruddy means, healthy, than those Israelites that are eating the king's meat, right, in captivity. So, verse 14. So he consented to them that in this matter and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat of the portion of the king's meat. Thus Belshazzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them the pulse. So after that 10-day period, that in a sense a 10-day experiment to see if they were going to look healthier than the other Israelites that were in captivity, they did. So he allowed them to continue eating the pulse instead of the king's meat and the king's wine. So when they go back to Daniel chapter 8, this is who we're speaking of, right? The prophet Daniel. So Daniel chapter 8, we start at verse 1 again. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel. after that which appeared unto me at the first. Now Belshazzar is the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah? Verse 2. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass that when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, right? Elam, what we know today as the East Indians, because remember, the Babylonians, they even conquered parts of Elam, what we know today as India or East India, all right, during those times. So it says, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. It says, then I lifted up my eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other. And the higher one came up last, right? So the 2 horns that were like a ram was the Persian and the Mede Empire, basically, yeah? So you've got the Persians and the Medes, and the Persians came up higher, were the ruling kings came more out of the Persian Empire than out of the Medes. So that's what the prophet Daniel saw. The two horns like a ram, which is the Persian and the Medes. He says, then I lifted up my eyes and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, which symbolically represents the Persian and the Medes Empire. But the one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last, right? And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. Because ultimately, it's the Most High that raised up the Persian and the Medes Empire to come and take down the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Because remember, Daniel had the vision of the 4 empires in Daniel chapter 7, and he speaks about that. But let me grab a precept here regarding the Persian and the Medes Empire, all right? So Isaiah 45, hold on. Because the Lord raised up Cyrus to be that power. Isaiah, I believe it's Isaiah 45. Yeah. Isaiah 45, verse 1. It says, thus says the Lord Yahweh to his anointed, to Cyrus, right? Whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the lions of kings to open before him the 2 leaf gates, and the gates shall not be shut. So what were the 2 leaf gates? The 2 leaf gates were the gates that represented the Babylonian Empire, right? The Neo-Babylonian Empire. Because when you went into Babylon, they had these massive gates with golden leaves on them. That's why it says 2 leaf gates. So this symbolically and literally represented the Babylonian Empire. So Cyrus was anointed by the Most High, raised up to take down the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which would have happened under Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. So it says verse 2. So just to show you that it's the Most High that raises up these kings, it's the Most High that raises up these leaders and takes them down, all right? We think leaders are put in powers because, you know, people are voting left, right, Labour, Conservative, Republican, Democrat, whatever you want to call it, right? It's the Most High that raises up these leaders to be in power at certain times to fulfill his will. Remember the scripture says in the book of Proverbs chapter 27, I believe it's 27 or 29, it says, we quickly grab it. But we're just going to work in the spirit. I'm going to go through Daniel chapter 8, but we're going to work through the spirit and see what precepts come up while we go through. And as I always say, you brothers, you can put our precepts on the comment boards to help edify the flock while we're teaching and preaching, and we're breaking down Daniel chapter 8, all right? So, I was going to go to Proverbs. It's a lovely day today as well. Today is the 11th of October, and it feels like It feels like an early spring day today, basically. It's really lovely out here today. All praises to Yahweh by Shim Yahushai. There's no wind, there's no heavy wind like last week. Last week we had heavy winds blowing like gusts of 45 miles per hour. Whereas this week, it's mild, it's warm, it's sunny. Yeah, it's good. All we've got to do now is worry about is that it's the general public. So Proverbs 29, I want. 27. 26. Oh, 21. So it's Proverbs chapter 21. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, Yahweh. As the rivers of a water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord, Yahweh, pondereth the heart. So the king's heart, which means the king's mind, right, is in the hand of the Lord. So the Lord decides who comes into power, when and where. Because remember, everything we see taking place today has taken place in history. It's been the fulfillment of the Lord. This is the Lord's movie. This is the Most High show. He wrote the script for how the world began and how it's going to end, basically. He wrote the whole script on how it's all going to go down. What we're doing, we're breaking down the script to you, we're giving you understanding of the Lord's script through the prophecies that he's left to his prophets. So we are the men, we are the true prophets of the Lord. As we keep telling, the word prophet just means to speak before, all right? Pro means before. Fet means to speak. So that's what the word prophet means, to speak before. So we're speaking about these events before they take place. We're not bringing anything new to the table. We're not adding anything new to the Bible. We're just breaking down the scriptures and we're bringing the word to you, to the elect. All right, for those of you that have just first come into the truth, those of you that have been into the truth for a little while, we're bringing you this truth, this word of salvation, this gospel before these events take place. So Cyrus was raised up to be that leader during that time. Darius was that leadership that took down the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So when we go back to Isaiah 45, verse 2, it says, I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, which is the Babylonian Empire, right? And cut in sunder the bars of iron. And I will give thee the treasures of darkness and the hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the power of Israel. All right? Because ultimately, through the Persian and the Medes, is how the Israelites came to the end of their captivity in the Babylonian Empire. Because remember, at this time, the Israelites were coming to the latter part, the last few years of that 70-year captivity that the prophet Jeremiah spoke about, that they were going to go into under the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So the Lord had raised up Cyrus, the Persian and the Medes Empire, and the Persian is the one that became more powerful than the Medes, to take down the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And when they did that, they did it via what we call a surgical strike. They didn't go in at all. That's why the Lord says that's why the Lord says, I will loosen the lions of the kings to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. So the Lord says he's going to open up those gates. So remember, how did the Persians and the Medes, how did that ram take down the Neo-Babylonian Empire? How did they take down the lion? Because the Lord had set it all up. So remember, they had built it was a waterway that ran off from a particular river that the Babylonians actually built, but what they built was used against them to take them down. So it was like when people they do it today, where they break off the river and they create a new waterway for could be for farming, or for whatever reasons, and that they built a new waterway from a particular waterway that was already there. And this is what the Babylonians did. But it was the Persians and the Medes that used that to come in, to take down the Neo-Babylonian Empire. As I should know, as I said before, they didn't go in and an all-out war on the battlefield, fighting them for years on end. It was a surgical strike. While they was having a feast, they were taken down. And that's mentioned also in the book of Daniel, chapter 5. That's why the book of Daniel is not in any type of chronological order. Because when you go back to Daniel 5, it speaks about that takedown that the prophet Daniel is speaking about here in Daniel chapter 8, basically. Because remember, at that time they was having a feast during their takedown. So those leave gates, what we read there in Isaiah 45, was talking about what was going to happen to the Babylonians through the Persians, through Cyrus, and ultimately Darius. And I think also in Isaiah 44, so I couldn't find it. Isaiah 44, I'll start at verse 26. Also speaks about that time, right? This is Isaiah chapter 44, verse 26. It says that confirms the word, right? That confirms the word of his servant and performeth the counsel of his messengers. That says to Jerusalem, thou shalt be inhabited, and to the cities of Judah, ye shall be built, and I will raise up the decayed places thereof. That says to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up the rivers. That says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd. So the Lord used Cyrus as his shepherd. He is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Because Cyrus, when he had freed the Israelites from their captivity under the Neo-Babylonians, he made a declaration that the Israelites, those of them that wanted to go back to Jerusalem, could go back and build the second temple, basically. So he issued a decree that even the Persian Empire, the Persian and Medes, were going to even help fund the building of the second temple, basically. So he issued a decree to do that, Cyrus, and it was left during the times of Darius. I think it was during the times of Xerxes, where you had those other nations that was bringing information back to Xerxes, and that was trying to say that the Israelites were trying to build this wall, which was what would surround the second temple, to say they were trying to build this wall in Jerusalem in preparation to keep out the Persian and the Medes for when they want to go to war against them, basically it's such. So they was bringing misinformation back to Xerxes. And Xerxes' time was after Cyrus, after Darius. He was around, say like around 470, 480 BC. So Xerxes came later on. He was one of the later Persian kings, basically as such. But the Lord raised up Cyrus, as the prophet Isaiah is showing you here, to be the Lord's shepherd that was going to aid the Israelites in building that second temple, because it was Cyrus that made the decree for that to take place. So when we go back to Isaiah 44, verse 28, when it says, that says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, the Lord's shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple, thy foundation shall be laid. So it was even given to the prophet Isaiah to know about this. So Isaiah wrote about what Cyrus was ultimately going to do during the times of Daniel and the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 4. It says, I saw the ram. So Daniel chapter 8, verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. So he did according to his will, but his will was given to him by the Most High, by Yahweh. He allowed that to happen. He raised up Cyrus and Darius, the Persian and Mede Empire, to do this, because that was the vehicle, the nation the Lord was going to use to bring redemption back to the nation of Israel out of that captivity that they were under the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Verse 5, it says, and as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So who was the he-goat? The he-goat was Alexander the Great. So I go back to what I said earlier. Daniel had the vision of the 4 empires in Daniel chapter 7. He spoke about the he-goats. Let's quickly reference that. He spoke about the 4 beasts that came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Right? That's what Daniel spoke about. That was the vision that he had, that he wrote down in what we call Daniel chapter 7. And he said the first was like a lion, which represented the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And he said the second beast was like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth, which represented the ram, basically, which is what we call the what do you call it? The Persian and the Medes. So when it comes down to the goat, the leopard, when it says, and I beheld, and another was like a leopard, that leopard symbolically represents the goat here in Daniel's chapter 8. All right? So the goat was the 3rd beast in Daniel's chapter 7, which was referred to as the leopard. So now we go back to Daniel's chapter 8, verse 5 again. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came up from the west, and on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. So the ram is the Persian and Mede Empire. The goat is the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, because at this time now, the Greek Empire is controlled by Alexander. First it was his father Philip, and then when Philip died, Alexander took over, basically, as such. Yeah? So he's come up against the ram. The ram is the Persian and the Mede Empire. So when it says here in verse 7, Daniel's chapter 8, verse 7, it says, and I saw him come close unto the ram, the Persian and the Medes. Who's come close to him? The goat, the Greek Empire, Alexandria. And he came, and I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. So now the Lord had raised up Alexander the Great to take down the ram. I go back to Proverbs 21. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. So now the Lord has raised up Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire, to take down the ram, the Persian and the Medes Empire. And I believe at that time it was Xerxes. Was it Xerxes that was in power? Yeah, it was Xerxes that would have been in power. So the two horns are the Medes and the Persian Empire. So when he says, and there was no power in the ram, there was no power in the Persian. So at this time now, the Persian and Medes Empire wasn't that same power as it was during the times of Cyrus and Darius. Let's just double check, because I totally believe it is Xerxes that was in power time when Alexander took him down. But let me just double check. Maybe one of the brothers put it up on the comment board as well, but I'm going to check here as well. Double check everything. Let me see. Just going to double check myself. I believe it was Xerxes that was in power. So, okay. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire after a series of battles, most notably the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC. The victory allowed him to take control of the Persian capital, Persepolis, right? And the empire which stretched across 3 continents. Alexander's conquest began in 334 BC and was completed by 330 BC, ending over 200 years of Persian rule. See, every empire has a certain time. So this is why when we speak about Babylon the Great, the American Empire, next year they're getting ready to celebrate 250 years of rulership, of power. Lord willing, that's the year. Because it is normally a period of between 200 and 300 years that an empire is in power for before it's taken down. So Babylon has kind of reached that term now, and they're getting ready to celebrate that next year. So America's getting ready to celebrate its 250th year of being a nation and of being a power, a global power. And they're going to make a big hoo-ha about it next year. All right? They're going to create some, what they call it, bank holidays, national holidays next year to celebrate it. So Lord willing, in the name of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Barakatah Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, next year is the year. But only the Most High knows. But my point I'm making here is that every empire has a certain time limit. And we can see through the scriptures, we can see through what's going on in the secular world, that America is circling the drain. It's at the end of its tether. All right? So going back to what it says here, so I'm just confirming what I read to in the Bible. So the prophecy that I'm going to go back to regarding the ram and the goat is written about here in the secular history, basically. So in the secular history, it speaks here about the Persian Empire and the Greek Empire, and how the Persians were taken down by the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, after his 200 years of rule. So it says, key victories. Alexander's invasion was marked by brilliant military campaigns, with the greatest victory being the Battle of Gaugamela. Oh, so it was Darius. I'm glad I checked. Against Darius III. So I'm glad that I checked. That's what I say. That's what I said. Prove all things. You know, we'll say certain things, but to be 100% sure, we need to check or go into either to the scriptures or to the secular history to give that information to you. So it was Darius III, not Xerxes. So you know what it is? You know why I'm thinking Xerxes? Because I'm thinking of when they went up against the Spartans. You know the movie that they made, 300. That's why I was thinking Xerxes. And at that time, the Spartans, as you should know by now, the Spartans were Israelites that had their own city and colony within what we know today as modern Greece. The Spartans were not Europeans. The Spartans were Israelites, were so-called Negroes, people of color. The original Greeks were the sons and daughters of Japhet, the Japhites, the people that we know today as the Samoans, the Maui, the Hawaiians, the Fijis. They are the original Greeks. They are the Etruscans, just like the original Romans. The original Romans are the Etruscans. When Esau came into Europe from Mount Seir, they started to take down certain places in Europe. So the Romans, what we called Romans, the Edomites, when they began to live amongst the Etruscans in Italy, eventually the Romans became the dominant power. Kind of like what you saw when the Persian and the Medes came together, the two nations came together, which were the two horns, which was on the ram. When they came together, it was the Persians that became the dominant force. So the kings and the leaders eventually all came from the Persians, not from the Medes. So that happened with the Etruscans. When the Romans, which were Europeans, Edomites, when they came and they started to come into Italy and different parts of the West, what we know as Europe, they became the dominant force. So they eventually took down the Etruscans, and the kings and the emperors and that was in Rome now was coming from Esau and not from the sons and daughters of Japhet. See? Truly Babylon. So that's what was going on. So the same thing with the Persian and the Medes. So it was Darius III, not Xerxes. That's why it's always good to check this information to see. So that was during the Battle of Gaugamela against Darius III. So following Gaugamela, he advanced to Babylon and then captured Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire. It says, motives. His reasons included seeking revenge for past Persian invasions of Greece and a desire for glory and wealth. And one of those past Persian invasions was the battle that they had against the Spartans, which they made a movie about called 300. Except the people that they had acting in the movie did not represent who the Spartans were, because the Spartans were Israelites calling themselves Spartans that lived in Greece at that time, because Greece had separate, each major city had its own king. Athens had its king, Athens had its king, I forget the other major cities of Greece, but each major city in Greece, the Spartans had their king, they all had their own kings and their leaders. It's really when Alexander came along, when he conquered it, where it all became under one rulership, Greece. So it says that Alexander's conquests led to the spread of Greek culture, which would bring us to the times of the Hellenization, right? Greek culture, the Hellenization. So Alexander's conquest led to the spread of Greek culture across Asia, says it right here, creating a Hellenistic world of interconnected kingdoms and common language, according to the University of Canterbury. That's where you get your Israelite Gentiles from. Those are the Gentiles that the Apostle Paul went to. Those that were Hellenized under this world under this Hellenistic world of interconnected kingdoms. So remember, through Alexander the Great, this is how most of Asia, Western Europe and Asia, became Hellenized under Alexander the Great, and after he died, his 4 generals, basically. And that's how the Israelites became Hellenized. Ultimately, those were the Gentiles that the Apostle Paul went to, were the Israelites that were Hellenized or even Romanized. that were raised as Romans, because the Romans became a power later on. Under those kingdoms, those were the people that the Apostle Paul wrote to. So when he wrote the book of Romans, those were the Israelites living in Rome. When he wrote the book of Galatians, the letter of Galatians, the epistle, those were the Israelites living in Galatia. When he wrote to the church in Corinth, those were the Israelites living in Corinthia. When he wrote the book of Ephesians, those were the Israelites living in Ephesus. So forth and so on, just so you understand. Like I said, we're working in the Spirit today, so we're going to go wherever the Spirit takes. This is where we're going to go for today's lesson, but we're going to base it on Daniel chapter 8. So now back to Daniel chapter 8. So we've established who the ram is, we've established who the goat is, right? And we've established how that empire went down. So let's continue reading. So back to Daniel's chapter 8, verse 7. It says, and I saw him come close unto the ram, Persians, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, right? And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, no power. But he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. None, because it was time for the Persian and the Medes empire to go down. So there was nobody that could deliver out of his hand. Zero, simple as that. As I always say, when your time is up, your time is up. When your number's up, there's nothing we can do, or anybody can do. Verse 8, so Daniel chapter 8, verse 8. It says, therefore the he-goat, Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire, waxed very great. He waxed very great because he became, remember, he conquered most of the known world back then, Alexander the Great, all right? And when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. So when he became strong at his peak, Alexander died at his peak, literally at his peak. He was, I think, 31 or 32 years old when he died. Let's just double check. He died at his peak, Alexandra. And then his 4 generals took over, which is what he speaks about. When he speaks about the 4 notable wins, it's his 4 generals. They took over when Alexandra died. Let's just check when he died. 3rd of Macedon. Philip the 3rd. 336, 323 BC. What year was he born? That was his reign. "32 years old." So I was bang on. He was 32 years old when he died, Alexandra. So he was born in 356 BC and died in 323 BC. So he was at the peak of his power when he died, Alexandra. All right? Does it say what he died from? Yeah. So look, it says, by the age of 30, right, he had created one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Greece to northwestern India, right? And he was defeated in the battle and is widely considered to be one of the history's greatest and most successful military commanders. Yeah. So he died at 32. He came to the throne after his father died. He succeeded his father, Philip II. Because remember, Alexander's a Macedonian. He's an Edomite from Macedon, right? Which is right next door to Greece. So he came to the throne when he was 20 years old. By the time he was 30, he had conquered most of the known world, Alexander. But he died at his peak. He died when he was 32 years old because it was his time. As I said before, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, right? He directs it whichever way he wants. So Alexander's life and what he was going to do in that life was all already pre-written in the heavens. So back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 8. It says, therefore, the he-goat, which is Alexander the Great, waxed very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. So at his peak, he died when he was strong. His greatest battle was when he was at age 30. When he was 32, that's when he died. At his peak, he died. Right? And for it came up 4 horns. Sorry, it's lucky. And for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. So who are the 4 notable ones? Those are Alexander the Great's 4 generals that were ruling underneath him. Cassander, Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Seleucus. They referred to them as the Diadoches, basically. So those were his 4 generals. Cassander, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Antigonus. All right? So those are Alexander the Great. So when it says here in verse 8, when it says, and for it came up 4 notable ones, those 4 notable ones were Alexander the Great's 4 generals. That's who they were. The 4 winds of heaven. So the 4 winds of heaven symbolically represents those 4 generals that came up under Alexander the Great. And all this is written about in the secular history as well. So we know about these 4 generals as well through the secular history. It speaks about them. One of them, it's written about, they call it the 6 Syrian wars. Daniel got the prophecy about those 6 Syrian wars in the book of Daniel chapter 11. It's written about all of those 6 Syrian wars between the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic Empire. The Ptolemies controlled Egypt and the Seleucid Empire controlled Syria. So the 6 Syrian wars that Daniel spoke about in the book of Daniel chapter 11, all of chapter 11 is based on the wars between 2 of Alexander the Great's generals. Right? Antiochus, who came under the Seleucid Empire, and then you got the Ptolemies, right? The Ptolemaic Empire. So back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, right? Out of one of the 4 generals, out of one of the 4 empires, came out of it a little horn, right? And we're going to focus on that little horn quite a bit in Daniel chapter 8. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. So who is that little horn that waxed exceedingly great? That's Antiochus Epiphanes. And if I'm quite clear, it's Antiochus Epiphanes the 4th. That's that great little horn. When it says, when he waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, because the south towards the east. So Antiochus comes out of the Seleucid Empire, which was north of Israel, which is Syria. So when it says here, he waxed exceedingly great towards the south. As I spoke about earlier, the wars that they had with the Ptolemaic Empire under the Ptolemies, which controlled Egypt, which is south of Israel, right? Because Syria is north of Israel, the Ptolemaic Empire was south, because that's Egypt. So this is why he whacks at Sydney, because he got the better of the Ptolemies during those 6 Syrian wars. The Seleucid Empire got the better of the Ptolemaic Empire in Egypt during those 6 Syrian wars. So he did wax great towards the south and towards the east. And I believe towards the east was Antigonus, if I remember. He took down, because there was another general, let me just double, there was actually 4 notable generals. That's why the scripture says, came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. So there were 4 main generals, but there was a 5th one that I believe was the one that Antiochus, the Seleucid Empire, took down. That's why it says he waxed strong towards the east. But let's just double check that. Let's double check. I'm sure it says here, Darius. Let's see if it shows the, because I believe that's who it was. Let's see, Alexander.
I'm glad I did.
These 4 generals. 4. Because there was a 5th, but he wasn't notable. So Ptolemy, Cassander, that's it, yeah. Seleucus, Lacenaeus. So I believe it was Antigonus was the one to the east. Yeah, so Lacenaeus took control of Thrace and much of Asia Minor. Yep, which is correct. Seleucus seized the vast territories of Asia, Babylonian, Persia, and Syria. Yep, which is correct. Cassander. So I believe it was Antigonus who. I believe it was Antigonus who had the east, who he took down. Ptolemy the First, Lacenaeus, Epirus. Let me just see. Yeah, Antigonus.
Anyway, what's that like? No, just wait.
Army, Yeah. Yeah, it was Antigonus. Because Antigonus briefly emerged as the most powerful of the Diadoches, which are the generals, ruling over Greece, Asia Minor, Syria, yeah, Phoenicia, So that's what it was. Ptolemy and Lacenaeus came against Antigonus. So Ptolemy and Lacenaeus formed a coalition against him, which culminated in his decisive defeat and death at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. And his kingdom was divided up by Lacenaeus and Seleucus, but his son Demetrius survived and went on to seize control of Macedonia. So yeah, so his kingdom, after he died, was divided up between Lacenaeus and Seleucus. This is why the scripture speaks about 4 notable generals. So Antigonus wasn't one of the notable generals that went on, to have an empire ruled by him or his sons or his offsprings for the next 2 centuries, whereas the others did. So he was taken down. Yeah. So they all formed. They all came against him. That's Esau, and we see that today. So they all came against him. That's why it says, when it says during a series of wars. I'm just reading this to you, right? During a series of wars between Alexander's successors, which were his generals, Antigonus briefly emerged as the most powerful of the Diadoches, right? Ruling over Greece, because Diadochi is just a title that they give them, right? So he became the most powerful of the Diadoches, which are the generals, ruling over Greece, Asia Minor, Syria, Phoenicia, all right, Phoenicia, and northern Mesopotamia. Cassander, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and Lacenaeus formed a coalition against him. So all of the other four generals came up against Antigonus, basically, right? So they formed a coalition against him, which culminated in his decisive defeat and death at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. So the other four came against Antigonus. This is why when we go back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 8, right, when it says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, which was Alexander the Great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, right? So when he was strong, when he was at his strongest, he died. He was broken. He died, Alexander the Great. And for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of the earth. So the four notable ones were the four generals that came up against Antigonus. So the four notable generals that go on to have ruling empires for a very long time was Cassander, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and Lacenaeus. Those were the four notable ones. Antigonus was the fifth general, but the four notable ones came up against him and took him down, right, at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. And then his kingdom, so Antigonus's kingdom, what he got was divided up by Lacenaeus and Seleucus. So, in secular history, we're showing you what happened. Who were the four notable generals? Who was the fifth general, which was not considered a notable general? But when we go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 9, so when it says, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, that little horn is Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, who comes from the line of the Seleucid family line, right? He comes out of that line there, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east. So who was towards the east? That was Antigonus, because his empire was split between who? Lacenaeus and Seleucus, right? His empire was split between the two, Lacenaeus and Seleucus, all right? So, and then down the south, that goes into, like I said before, ultimately, he's going to go to war against Ptolemy, and he gets the better of the Ptolemaic Empire in the 6 Syrian Wars, basically. So he became, notably, the strongest out of all of them, was the Seleucid Empire. So the little horn is Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, which comes from the line of the Seleucid Empire. So when it says here, and he waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. So where is the pleasant land? The pleasant land is Israel, the promised land, because he also took control of that. And that was part of the wars that the Seleucid Empire under Antiochus was fighting against the Ptolemaic Empire, because they was always fighting over the control of the pleasant land, over Israel. So Antiochus got control over the pleasant land. He got control over the promised land. So that took place around, I would say around 180 BC. When Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes was around, and the Seleucid Empire took control of the pleasant land, which is the promised land. Just like you see today, everyone's fighting over the pleasant land today. You got the small hats and the raggeds fighting over the pleasant land. So you got raggeds on one side, small hats on the other side, fighting over the pleasant land. Everybody's fighting over something that none of them are going to have in the end. So they're both fighting over the pleasant land today, just like they were fighting over the pleasant land back then. That's why we would say Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. What is then has been? Let me just quickly read that. See? Spirit told me just to pull that one out. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. The thing that has been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. There's no new thing under the sun. So the same thing we see taking place now in the promised land, we saw take place back then. They were fighting over the pleasant land back then. They're fighting over the pleasant land today. There's no new thing under the sun. Verse 10, Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 10. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It has been already of old time, which was before us. So what we see taking place in the promised land today has been going on all the way back to when Joshua went into the land and took down the 7 Canaanite tribes. There's nothing new under the sun. Everyone thinks that what we see happening today is new. It's not new, it's just prophetic. They've always been fighting over the promised land. They're going to keep fighting over it right up to the day until the Lord comes. And they're going to die over it as well. Because they're fighting over something that neither of them are going to take control of in these last days. But it's all part of the Lord's plan. So there is no new thing under the sun. So back then you had the Edomites fighting over the land. You had the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire fighting over the Promised Land. Today, you've got the Ishmaelites and the Amalekites fighting over the Promised Land. Nothing changes. Everyone wants our land. And it's only going to be divvied up when the Lord comes to his people. And only the Lord's people are going to receive it. So where was I? Daniel chapter 8 verse 10 now. It says, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. All right? And it cast down some of the hosts of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. So who's the host of heaven? Who did Antiochus Epiphanes cast down? Who is the stars to the ground? So that's symbolically talking about the Israelites in the southern kingdom. All right? So how do we know that? How do we know when we're reading Daniel chapter 8, verse 10, when it says that it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them? So there's a couple of scriptures that we can go to show you that. So when it speaks about the host, some of the hosts and the stars to the ground, symbolically represents the children of Israel. When it says he stamped upon them, which was at this time the southern kingdom. Because at this time only the southern kingdom in its entirety existed in Israel. The northern kingdom had already been taken into captivity and they never ever came back to the land. And they were replaced in that land by the king of Assyria. Right? The Assyrian king during that time of their captivity, around 725 BC. So this period of time now that we're talking is it's probably about 600 years, about 550 years later, we're talking, to 600 years later. So the scripture that we can go to is Revelation chapter 12, right? Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. When it says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, all right? A woman clothed with the sun. So the woman symbolically represents the nation of Israel. And the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. All right? So the 12 stars are what? The 12 tribes of Israel. But that's what they are. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. The red dragon represents the Roman army, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 European empires, 10 horns represents the EU today, and the 7 crowns upon his head, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven. So the 12 stars represented the 12 tribes of Israel. But during the times of the red dragon, the Roman Empire, right? During that time, when the Roman Empire came against Israel, at that time only the southern kingdom was there. The southern kingdom represented the 3 tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. So when it says, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman represents Israel, the third part of the stars, the southern kingdom, which was ready to be delivered to devour her child. Her child was Yahushai. So this is during the time of the Roman Empire, during the time when the southern kingdom was only there. Now there were remnants of the northern kingdom living amongst the southern kingdom. And when I mean remnants, I truly mean remnants. You know, a family there, a few families there, you know, spread out amongst the southern kingdom. But the bulk and the majority of the northern kingdom had gone to the Americas after their captivity under Shalmaneser the fourth, the Assyrian king. Some people refer to him as Tilgapilsa or Tilgapilsa, which is, these are like titles they give him. Shalmaneser is a title, basically. He was the king of the Assyrian, not Syria, the Assyrian Empire, basically. He took the northern kingdom into captivity around 725 BC. And as a whole, they never went back to the land. Now you can read about that in, I think it's 1 Kings chapter 10. It speaks about the northern kingdom going into captivity, basically. But going back to the point here, the stars symbolically represent the nation of Israel. The 12 stars, the 12 tribes. When they took a third part of the stars, that's the southern kingdom. So when we read in Daniel chapter 8, we know that the stars here is talking about the southern kingdom. So when it says here, and he waxed great even to the host of heaven, and he cast down some of the host and of the stars. Anybody, right? And some of the stars, and the stars are the what? The southern kingdom, to the ground, and stamped upon them. Because Antiochus Epiphanes, he dealt with the southern kingdom in a very barbaric way. Esau went all out back then under Antiochus to subjugate our ancestors that was living in Judea, Israel, Jerusalem during that time. And another one, let me grab that, First Maccabees, because that speaks about it a little bit as well. When that Antiochus Epiphanes, I believe it's First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 11, I believe. I'm going to start at verse 7. So like, this is the book of First Maccabees, chapter 1. So I'm reading straight out of the King James Bible. Don't get it twisted. This is the full King James Bible with the Apocrypha in it. All right? I'm reading straight out of King James. See here? First Maccabees. Straight out of the Bible. So the first book of Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. So he reigned 12 years. Why? We read it earlier, right? He came into power when he was 20, after his father, Philip II, the king of Macedonia, Philip the Macedonian, when he died. Alexander was 20 years old when he took the throne. And he died when he was 32. So he ruled for 12 years, Alexander. Hey, you all right? So Alexander ruled for 12 years, basically. So Alexander reigned for 12 years and then died. 12 years and then died. And we showed you that, it's not just in this, we showed you that in secular history, that he ruled for 12 years and died. And his servants bear rule, everyone in his place. His servants were the 4 generals, the 4 notable ones that we spoke about earlier, right? Verse 9. So we're still in the book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 9. It says there, and after his death, after Alexander's death, they all put crowns upon themselves. Why did they do that? Because they killed off all of Alexander's offsprings. This is what they did to grab power back then. They do the same thing today, but they're just much more clever about it today when they want to kill off the opposition or someone that's a threat to their, to their power. So this is what they did. They killed these 4 generals. They collaborated to kill off all of Alexander's offsprings that he had. So none of them could claim his throne. And this is why it says that after his death, after Alexander's death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them. These are the 4 notable generals, because remember, Antigonus was taken down, right, by the 4 generals. And many years, it says, and after his death, they all put crowns upon their heads, upon themselves. So did their sons after them. And many years, evils were multiplied in the earth, right? All under Esau's watch. The scripture that says, when the righteous are in power, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people mourn. No new thing under the sun. The wicked are ruling today. The people are mourning in the 4 corners of the world. The people are mourning because the people that are in power today are the wicked. So they are mourning just today, just no different. But this particular time here, we're coming up to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes that I spoke about earlier. So it says there, verse 10, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king. So he's the son of Antiochus the Great, Antiochus Epiphanes the 4th. So, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the Great, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. All right? So this is the man now that came into power. So this is who we're speaking about here in Daniel chapter 8. That wicked root, Antiochus Epiphanes the 4th. He's the son of Antiochus the Great. So we go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 10. He said, and it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars of the ground, and stamped upon them. All right? So this is what Antiochus Epiphanes did to the nation of Israel in that pleasant land, which is the promised land. Verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the daily sacrifice was done where? Was done in Solomon's temple. So this man came, Antiochus Epiphanes, he came and he defiled the temple. And he took away the daily sacrifice, because now he had become, he took control over the pleasant land, over the promised land. So it says here in verse 12, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgressions, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So let me see if I can grab the scripture regarding that. I think it's still back in 1 Maccabees again. First Maccabees. So verse 44. I want to read about how he took away the daily sacrifice. So this is the back to First Maccabees, chapter 1. I'm going to start at verse 38 and read a few verses down. So First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 38. Insomuch that the inhabitants, right, of Jerusalem fled because of them, whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers, right, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feast were turned into mourning. This is they took away the daily sacrifice, turned into mourning. Her Sabbaths into reproach. Her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellencies was turned into mourning. Moreover, this is the point, verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his kingdom, to his whole kingdom, that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the city of Judea, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice, and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and the festival days, which are what? The high holy days, right? And verse 45 again. And forbid the burnt offerings and sacrifices, and drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbaths and the festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and the holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beast, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. So this is what he did. So they set up altars and groves in Israel, and chapels of idols, and sacrificed swine's flesh and unclean beasts. So this is how they profane. Let me go back to, because in Maccabees it goes deep into how these heathens came against Israel, especially the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, and the things that they've done to defile not just the temple but the promised land. So when we go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 11, And it says here, yea, he magnified himself, Antiochus Epiphanes. We just read about that in 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. So we read about that. He gave the commandment that they should leave their laws, leave their high holy days, leave their festivals, the high holy days, and that they should build temples of idols and groves, and they were sacrificing unclean animals and swines in the, not just in the Holy Land, but in the temple. So this is what he got them to do. They consented to it, right? And it was under restraint. He did that to them, basically, yeah? It says, and by him, Antiochus Epiphanes, the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, as we just read, right? And a host was given unto him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgressions. And it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered. Because many Israelites joined on to, signed up to what Antiochus was asking them to do. So what he was doing, he practiced it and it prospered in the land of Israel. So all of those unclean animals that they were sacrificing in the land, the unclean foods that they was eating, the abominations, the building of the temples and the idols and the groves, all of these things Antiochus pushed, but he had many Israelites that signed up to it, that was quite happy to be part and parcel of it, basically. So verse 13. So Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. It says, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgressions of the desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? So Daniel was seeking to find out how long these abominations were going to go on, not just in the temple, but in the land, basically. Right? Which I just read in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 from verse 38 down to verse 50. To verse 14. And he says unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So this is where the sons of Matthias comes in, until the sanctuary can be clean. This is why we have the book of the Maccabees, because it speaks about the guerrilla warfare that the sons of Matthias led against Antiochus and his men, and the wickedness that they was doing and the abominations that they was pushing in the land of Israel. So that period of time that the angel says to Daniel represents the period of time that they were gonna that Antiochus Epiphanes and his men were going to be allowed to commit these abominations, and those wicked Israelites that signed up to it. Because you always get willing Israelites that will sign up to Esau's plan and will do the things that Esau are pushing them to do to earn favor with these Edomites. Yeah? Because remember, these are Edomites. Antiochus, the Seleucid Empire, are Edomites. Always remember that, yeah? They're all Edomites. The Ptolemies are Edomites. Those generals that came under Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was an Edomite. His father, Philip the Macedonian, they were Edomites. So let's go back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 15. Verse 14. So the angel said unto me, unto Daniel, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So the sanctuary being cleansed brings us to what? What we're going to be celebrating it's next month. The 25th day of the 10th month for 7 days, which we refer to as Hanukkah. So that's what's coming up next. The next high holy day celebration will be Hanukkah. All right? So that Hanukkah represents the temple being cleaned and purified again after the wars that the Maccabees had against Antiochus Epiphanes. So that's why it says, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. It's not going to be cleansed until the sons of, let's get them, sons of the Maccabees. They could even be here today, boy, amongst the brothers somewhere. We just don't know. So these were the sons here. I'll read a little bit about that led up to that confrontation, that led up to the beginning of the guerrilla warfare. So we're in the book of 1st Maccabees, chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 1. Give you a little bit of backstory. It says, in those days arose Matthias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorab from Jerusalem that dwelt in Modane. So the Maccabees were what? They were Levites. And Levites are priests, right? But they were Levites. So these were like warrior priests. All right? Because they were sons of priests. Matthias was their father. So he had 5 sons. Johanna, called Cadius. Simon, called Thasseus. Judas, who was called Maccabeus. Because Judas got the Greek nickname of Maccabee, which means the hammer. Because he was the most militant of the sons, and probably the best fighter of the sons, and that led the best military campaigns against Antiochus Epiphanes and his men. So it says Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar, called Oram, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphius. So these are the 5 sons of Matthias, who led the guerrilla warfare against Antiochus Epiphanes because of this defilement that took place. So remember, Daniel writes all about this roughly 500 years. Not 500 years, but Daniel, that was around 500 BC, say 525 BC. So Daniel writes about all of this roughly about 300 years before it took place. 325 years before it took place, Daniel writes about this. So we're still in the book of 1st Maccabees, chapter 2, verse 6. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, that Daniel wrote about, that the angel told Daniel was going to take place, all right, 325 years before it happened. And when he had saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me, wherefore I was born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, who was what? The Greeks, under the Seleucid Empire, under the king Antiochus Epiphanes IV. So Matthias is saying, woe is me, right? That he was born to see this misery, the misery that the angel told Daniel, the prophet, about during the time of the Babylonian captivity, which was 6th century BC. So it says, woe is me, wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation has not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? All these nations have had a part of our kingdom and part of our spoils. And we see that today. Two nations are fighting over our kingdom, the promised land, the kingdom of heaven that's coming to earth. The Ishmaelites and the Edomites fighting over the promised land. Verse 11, it says, all her ornaments are taken away of a free woman. She has become a bond slave. Just like today, Israel has become a bond slave under the Edomites and under the Ishmaelites. It's become a bond slave, all right? It says, and behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. They're profaning it today. The angel told Daniel about it back then, that they were going to profane the sanctuary. So what the angel Gabriel was speaking to Daniel about is what took place under Antiochus Epiphanes IV, during the times of the Maccabees, Matthias and his 5 sons, just so you understand. So it says, and behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. To what end therefore, shall we live any longer? So when you read further down, it jumps to the part where, Matthias and his sons, I'll just read it down a little bit more. Verse 14, then Matthias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned very sore. So this is how they profaned the sanctuary. It happened under the watch of Matthias and his 5 sons, which is why we have the 2 books of the Maccabees that speak about these events. But the point we're making here is that all of these events were prophesied, was given to Daniel when he was in captivity under the Babylonian captivity, basically, yeah? So if we go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 15, it says, and it came to pass when even I, Daniel, so we're back in Daniel's chapter 8, verse 15. And it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Uli, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So Gabriel's the angel that came to Daniel to make him understand the vision. Gabriel the same angel that came to Mary and Joseph? Gabriel. Yeah. That was Gabriel the angel that the Lord sent to reveal this vision to Daniel, basically. I believe it was. I can't find it, but I'm sure it was Gabriel. Gabriel was the same angel that came to Mary and Joseph. But the 4 angels that we know about are Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, and Michael. Raphael came to Tobit. Michael also came to Daniel. Gabriel, it's Gabriel, yeah. Gabriel came to Mary and Joseph. So, it says here, verse 16. So Daniel chapter 8, verse 16. It says, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Uli, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, When he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Because some of the stuff that Daniel was shown was to do with not just our end times, but his times that he was living in as well, basically. So this particular vision was coming to the prophet Daniel, was regarding the times of the Maccabees, around about 170 BC, that this was going to take place, that we're reading about here in Daniel chapter 8. So it says, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face towards the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having two horns. I haven't read Daniel chapter 8 for such a long time, but I even forget that it does break it down for you what Daniel was shown in a vision by the angel. I even forgot he actually breaks it down for you, as you're going to see, which is good, which is really good. So verse 19, Daniel chapter 8 verse 19. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, right? For at the time appointed the end shall be. So the indignation was the defilement of the sanctuary. What we read about in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 44 down to verse 50. Yeah? So, Daniel chapter 8, verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of the Media, and the Persians, right? And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, Alexander the Great, right? And his great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. These are Antiochus. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. I said that earlier. The four kingdoms that shall stand up out of the nations, but not in his power, are the four generals that became the four notable ones that became the four winds. The reason why it says not in his power, because it's not his sons. Remember, Alexander's generals killed his sons and killed all of his offsprings, so that the powers that came after him were not standing up in Alexander's power, because they were not Alexander's offsprings. So Seleucid, Antigonus, Cassander, Lacenaeus were not the offsprings of Alexander the Great. So they were not standing up in his power. They killed Alexander's offspring to totally claim his power and his territory and his kingdom and his rulership. So let's go back to we're still in Daniel chapter 8 verse 22. It says, now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nations. Hello, darling. But not in his power, not in Alexander the Great's power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions are come to full, right? A king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. I think we've got to 1 Maccabees chapter 1. So I'm still talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, right? And in the latter time of their kingdom, when transgressions are come to full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. So this is that fierce king that's still talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth, because he was the worst out of all of them. Out of all of the Seleucid kings, Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, he was the worst. All right. And we read that earlier in First Maccabees. That's why it says, and he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. He's that fierce king, and he shall destroy wonderfully. We read about that earlier in First Maccabees chapter 1. I think it was around verse 9. It spoke about how evils would multiply in the earth after Alexander. Put it up again. That's that fierce king. When it says that evils would multiply. We'll just touch it up again for those of you that might have missed it earlier. First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 9. It says, and after his death they will put crowns upon themselves, after Alexander the Great's death. Right? So did their sons after them. So did their sons, their sons, their sons' sons after them, until we get to the times of Antiochus Epiphanes IV under the Seleucid Empire. It says, so did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Right? And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So this is that wicked root, that wicked and evil king that came out of the Seleucid Empire, that was the son of Antiochus the Great. So when we go back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 23, when it says, and in the latter time, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions are come to full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. That's Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Verse 25. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Antiochus Epiphanes IV we're still talking about. And we see the same, like I said, there's no new things under the sun. We see the same thing today. Through Esau's policies today, you know, he has caused craft to prosper through his policies today. So we see that Donald Trump's a perfect example of that. Keir Starmer is a perfect example of that. We're talking about the digital ID. So we see these things happening again, basically. So I say again, and through his policy, also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So that's Antiochus Epiphanes we're speaking about here. But we see the same thing that we said, there's no new thing under the sun. We see the same things happening today through the policies of these Edomite leaders. As I said before, Keir Starmer is pushing the digital ID, all right? Through his policies, also he shall cause craft to prosper, digital ID. We see Trump doing that in America. You know, he's speaking about he's going to do executive orders to get rid of so freedom of speech is no longer allowed unless you speak of a certain thing or say a certain thing. Otherwise, the rest of what people are speaking, if it's against the government or if it's against America, like for instance, the burning of the US flag, that's freedom of speech. He's made it a federal law now where you can get a year in jail for burning the American flag or the Israeli flag. You know, so this is what he's done. So freedom of speech has gone, in a sense, because that's freedom of speech. You want to burn a flag, you want to burn a flag. We don't advocate that. Any Israelite that's burning flags has lost his mind, like that. Right, they've lost their minds. We don't advocate any Israelite, whether you're teaching in the truth or just found out you're Israelite. We don't advocate that you burn the flag or any flag. If you're a prophet or preacher, come out and preach, do your work, do your videos in the week, you know, and get on with your normal 9 to 5 job, and supporting your family. If you've got a family, supporting your family, do what you're doing with your family, and so forth and so on. We don't advocate any type of carnal actions or violence or protesting or anything like that. We don't advocate none of that. We're just here to preach the word in truth and spirit and sincerity. So going back to what it says here, this is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. But yes, we could apply it to these Edomite leaders today through their craft. Through his policy, he shall cause craft to prosper. So we do see that today, because these are the Edomites are here. These are the same Edomites that were back then. They're back here today. But this particular verse is talking directly about Antiochus Epiphanes IV during the times of the subjugation of the Israelites around 175 BC. So it says, and he shall also stand up against the prince of princes, which is Yahushua, but he shall be broken without hand. So how is he going to be broken without hand? How did Antiochus Epiphanes die? I believe he was some type of bowel cancer. Let me see if I can find it. I know it's in 2nd Maccabees. Second Maccabees chapter 9. So let me read. I'm going to read from the top, all right? So I believe he had some type of bowel cancer or colon cancer. I haven't read this for a little while, but let's read it and we'll see where it takes us, right? So we're in the book of 2nd Maccabees chapter 9, verse 1. It says, about that time came Antiochus with dishonor out of the country of Persia, for he had entered the city called Persepolis, and went about to rob the temple and to hold the city, whereupon the multitude, running to defend themselves with their weapons, put them to flight. And so it happened. A lot of ambulance so far. And so it happened. Antiochus, so we're in the book of 2nd Maccabees, chapter 9, verse 1. So it happened, Antiochus, being put to flight of the inhabitants, returned with shame. Now when he came to Ecbatana, news was brought him that what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus. Then swelling with anger, talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, then swelling with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Jews the disgrace done unto him by those that made him fly. Therefore commanded he his chariotman to drive without ceasing, and to dispatch the judgment of the Most High, now following him. For he had spoken proudly in this sort. For he had spoken proudly in this sort. Yea, he would come to Jerusalem and make it a common burying place of the Jews. So he spoke proudly about what he was going to do to the Israelites in Jerusalem and how he was going to destroy them, because he was now coming back. He was now doubly mad because he heard that Nicanor, one of his generals, and Timotheus were being weakened in a battle in a place called Ecbatana. So he was double angry with what was going on back in Israel and in Jerusalem. So he said he was going to make Jerusalem a common burying place for the Jews. This is what Antiochus Epiphanes IV was boasting. Kind of how you see how these Edomites boast today, in their destruction and the wickedness that they do. All right? Verse 5. So 2nd Maccabees chapter 9, verse 5. But the Lord Almighty, Yahweh, the power of Israel smote him with an incurable and invisible plague. For as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remedies came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts. Right? So the Lord struck him down with some type of bowel or colon cancer. So it says, and that the most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. Howbeit he nothing at all ceased from his bragging. Right? So even though when he was getting those pains in his bowels, in his stomach, he still continued bragging about the Jews that he was going to kill in Jerusalem. Right? So howbeit he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride. Kind of like that pride we saw in that Edomite. I did a video about it. Apostle Tahar did a video about it. Elder Benata Zappa did a video about that preacher, that Christian preacher that was saying that we should be glad that the white man's ships came to the shores of West Africa and brought us to the Americas and enslaved us, and apparently took us out of our huts and enslaved us, and through his slavery he made us a better person. And that if we're looking for reparations, our reparation is that you should be glad that you're able to live in America. So that was a pride and proudful Edomite that was in that video, and he was an actual white supremacist Christian priest, a right nationalist, should I say, Christian priest he was. And he was speaking proudly, and I love it when they speak proudly until the Lord strikes them down. So Antiochus was speaking proudly back then on how he was going to murder and massacre the Israelites back in Jerusalem during the time of his reign. All right. So he was on his way there. He told his chariot drivers to not cease, to drive as fast as they can, to get to Jerusalem as fast as they can, because he was planning on going on a murder spree, to murder as many Jews as he could, to set an example amongst our ancestors. This what he was planning before the Most High struck him down with this bowel disease, which we believe was bowel cancer or colon cancer, all right? Which is the same thing. So back to verse 7. 2 Maccabees chapter 9, verse 7. It says, howbeit he nothing at all ceased from bragging, but was still filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews, and commanding to haste the journey. But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pain. So he fell from his chariot, right? And he damaged his body even worse. So he added more affliction to himself on top of the affliction that he was already receiving from what the Lord did by striking him down with that type of bowel cancer. So he fell from his carriage now, right? So his body was much in pain. And thus, verse 8, and thus he, that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea, so proud was he beyond the condition of man, and weighed the high mountains in a balance, was now cast on the ground and carried in a horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifestation of the Most High. So now he had to be carried in a horse litter. So now he was no longer able to even stand up or sit in a carriage. They had him in a horse litter, which I think is what they put hay in, that they carried the horse's hay in behind him. He had to lay down in a horse litter because he could no longer sit up or stand up. So from the pain that he was getting in his bowels, and also from the fall, he could no longer stand or sit up in his carriage. Verse 9, so that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man, and while he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. So he also now, his flesh was rotting away on his stomach, so he also now was carrying a stink. A smell was coming from Antiochus Epiphanes, that even his soldiers and his men couldn't bear to be traveling side by side next to him or behind him because of the smell that was coming from Antiochus Epiphanes, from his wounds, basically. So it says here, back to verse 9, so that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man, and while he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. And the man that sought a little afore that he could reach to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. All right? Kind of reminds me what the Lord did to Nebuchadnezzar when he turned him into a wild beast because of his bragging and boasting. But Nebuchadnezzar came to his senses and he realized that there was a power higher than him that put him in power, that all man has to obey basically. Because remember, Nebuchadnezzar, the Most High turned Nebuchadnezzar into a beast, walking on all fours, covered in hairs and nails growing out like an animal. And he had him walking on all fours until Nebuchadnezzar realized that there was a power higher than him. And he put his pride to one side. So this is what the Lord did to, this is what the Lord is doing to Antiochus Epiphanes. Verse 10, it says, and that man that thought a little afore that he could reach to the stars, that thought he could do anything, just like Esau today, to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. Here, therefore, being plagued, he began to leave off his great pride and to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of the Most High, his pain increasing every moment. And when he himself could not abide his own smell, he couldn't even abide his own smell, Antiochus, he said these words, it is meet to be subject unto the Most High, and that a man that is mortal should not proudly think of himself as if he were a god. And that's Esau today. Esau is a mortal man, but he thinks of himself as a god because of his wealth, his military, his AI, you know, his politics, all of the things that he controls today. Esau thinks of himself as being a god. So Antiochus is showing you here now. He said, when he himself could not abide his own smell, so when he could not even take his own smell from the rotten of his own flesh, he said these words, it is meet for me to be subject unto the Most High, because every man is subject unto the Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and that a man that is mortal, which we all are, we're all mortals, Esau's a mortal man, should not proudly think of himself as if he were a god. So then it goes into how he, you know, how that he's asking the Lord for mercy. I don't really want to read all of it. I'm just trying to get to the part where he actually drops off. Let me see. This happened to murder person. Yeah, because he finally dies basically off his off these wounds. Governor. Yeah, the big shot. Tied in. Yeah, because he finally died of cancer, of that colon cancer. 29, 28. I think it's here. Verse 28. We jump down to verse 27. So we're still in 2 Maccabees chapter 9. Jump down to verse 27. It says, For I am persuaded that he, understanding my mind, will favorably and gracefully yield to your desires. Thus, the murderer and blasphemer, talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth, having suffered most grievously as he entreated other man, so died he a miserable death in a strange country in the mountains. So he died a miserable death in the strange country in the mountains. So the reason why I was reading all of that regarding his death, because coming to the end of Daniel chapter 8, what we read here, when it said, Daniel chapter 8, verse 25, and it says, and through his policies, Antiochus Epiphanes the Great's policies, also, Epiphanes the fourth, and through his policy also, he shall cause to prosper, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, as we just read, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So we read how he died. He was broken with a hand, meaning he wasn't killed in a battle. No one didn't fire a spear at him or an arrow, or he was in a sword fight. He didn't die when he fell off the carriage from his wounds. He died from the bowel cancer or the colon cancer that the Most High put upon him, that ended up causing his whole stomach to start rotting from the inside to the outside, till the smell became so unbearable. And when you read the rest of 2 Maccabees chapter 9, you'll see how he changed his whole stance regarding Israel and the things that he promised them, and that he got rid of all of the laws that he bestowed upon them. All these things that he put upon Israel, he reversed it in his last days, looking for the mercy for the Most High. But the Most High made him die of those wounds. That's why it says he was taken. That's why it says he was broken without hand. The Most High broke him without laying a glove on him, like a physical glove on him. All right? He didn't need another man to kill him in his sleep, poison him or stab him or knife him or drown him. The Most High did it by putting that plague on him, which we believe was colon cancer, that caused his stomach to rot from the inside out. So verse 26, it says, and the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Therefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted. I was sick certain days, because Daniel became ill when he was getting these visions, right? Afterwards I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So he was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. And that was Daniel's chapter. Oh, look at that, beautiful. We actually got through it all. So that was all of Daniel's chapter 8 broken down. Lord willing, you were edified by the breakdown of Daniel chapter 8 and the precepts that we brought in to back it up, and the secular history that we showed you regarding it, and also the precepts that I know the brothers are putting up on the comment board, that they've been putting up to this edification, to edify you, to do today's edification. I didn't get to them, but I know these brothers were putting up some positive precepts regarding today's lesson and that. So we're going to call it a day there. Yeah, look, that's beautiful. We just hit the 2-hour mark. As always, that was the vision of the ram and the goat. As I say, Daniel chapter 8 from 1 to 20 to 28. I pray that you were edified. As always, I want to give all the praises and the glory to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakah, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and to the elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to you. Shalom to the whole elect brothers of the house of Israel. As I said, the brother Rakah, he's got man flu. We call it man flu, right? So he wasn't here today. So Lord willing, he'll be all right. He'll recover for the rest of the week. He'll be here next week. As I always say, there's two things that can take you out of camp: illness, or you may have to work on that particular day for whatever reason, as such. But Lord willing, he'll get better and he'll be here next week. But yeah, I pray you were edified. To you few sisters, that was the book of Daniel chapter 8. I hadn't gone into Daniel chapter 8 for such a long time. So the Spirit took me there today. Lord willing, it was edifying to all of you that tune in today. And for those that may tune in later, as I always say, keep praying, keep safe, repent, and hold on to this truth. We are truly in these last days. I said it earlier, there's no new thing under the sun. We are seeing these things come back again to us. Just hold on to this faith. As always, shalom, shalom, shalom. Double honors to the apostles and to the elders of Great Millstone, as always. Shalom, shalom, shalom. All praise and glory to the Heavenly Father. Shalom, family.